Hello, everyone, and welcome to the World Pulse podcast. I'm your host, Sheena Katz, and I'm really glad that you're here today. World Pulse is a social impact network supporting grassroots women leaders who are advancing gender equity worldwide. And this podcast is here to explore how change actually happens in the world, not only through policies or institutions, but through connection, through listening, and through the bridges that we build between people, communities, and possibility. At World Pulse, we often talk about creating a digital bridge to change, a bridge that connects women across borders, cultures, and lived experiences, a bridge that turns stories into shared understanding and understanding into collective action. Because meaningful change does not happen in isolation. It happens when women are able to find one another across geography, sector, and circumstance and move forward together. In this podcast series, we're especially interested in how women navigate complexity, how they build trust, how they make decisions in moments of uncertainty, and how connection, particularly in a digital world, becomes a catalyst for real, lasting change. Each episode is an invitation, not just to listen, but to cross a bridge, to reflect, to engage, and to see yourself as part of a global community working towards a more just and equitable future. And today, I am honored to be joined by Ann Witsil, a strategic facilitator, cross-sector advisor, and board leader who has spent much of her career helping people navigate moments of tension, transition, and complexity. Ann serves on boards of organizations including Future 500 and World Pulse, and her work consistently centers on one core idea, that meaningful progress begins with listening across differences. Ann, welcome to the podcast. We're so happy you're here today.
Thank you, Sheena. I'm thrilled to be here. I love World Pulse, and it's a great honor to be part of your podcast today.
So, Ann, you've spent much of your career facilitating conversations across differences, whether it's sectors, ideologies, cultures, and power dynamics. So, when you hear the phrase bridging the divide, what does that mean to you personally?
Great question. Really, it means taking the time to get out of my or our own little bubbles to stop and listen, to understand, and put myself, ourselves in another's skin. Really to find a vein of common ground and to let another person know that I have heard them. You want to seek the trust and hope to move forward together, working on a shared issue. I want to just say that unfortunately, more recently, the polarities, the divides, now are so manufactured and magnified by mainstream media to the benefit of a very few. It creates the need for all of us, the majority out there, to remember some basics in relating to one another, taking the time to really listen, to understand and respect the humanity and dignity and shared basic values with each other. That's what it means to me, bridging the divide.
And now, was there an early experience in your life or career that first showed you the cost of not reaching across to understand, or even the possibility that opens up when we do?
Yes, great. I think we all learn some communication strategies, effective or not, as siblings, right? And those close relationships are sometimes the most challenging. But I really felt challenged and intrigued by how effective and disastrous not really hearing to understand or communicating with others as a fledgling campaign manager in my early 20s for a mayoral candidate. I was delivering speeches and meeting with diverse inner city community leaders and residents, thrown into speech writing and deliveries, boldly hoping to scintillate a skeptical crowd. That was probably worse than being a stand-up comedian with no laughs. I mean, pretty disastrous if you haven't taken the time to really assess what others value and how best to engage in a meaningful conversation.
And now you've worked with corporations, nonprofits, governments, and community groups, often in moments of tension or transition. What have those environments taught you about how divides form in the first place?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So salient. You know, the fear of change, the unknown, and poor communications from leadership or not taking the time to really understand where folks are, that's what causes the tensions. People need to be heard and feel part of a process that they can help transform and own. If things are done to them, mergers, acquisitions, major strategic shifts or leadership transitions, without their involvement, input, or partial ownership in the process, the result is usually pretty disastrous.
And as a strategic facilitator, you were often brought in when perspectives are polarized. So when you enter a room like that, what's the first thing that you listen to or you listen for when people feel fundamentally opposed to one another?
Yeah, really the common ground. What values or visions they share, what important changes they can agree upon that need to occur. And and to do that, you really need to focus on the future and those shared hopes, not on the past divides. That's what I listen for, whether there's energy around an issue that they can all get behind. There was a fellow named William Ury who you may have heard, Getting to Yes. It's a really early negotiation tactics book. And more recently, he has written a book called Possible. And that book promotes a process that is not a win-win or not a win-lose situation, but how can you get to something that's feasible together? After self-reflection to kind of know what your own perspectives and beliefs are, and then what he calls going to the balcony, zooming in and zooming out to understand the landscape of views, and then start this dialogue again to find where do you have common ground? What issue can you both rally behind, or groups rally behind, that you can both nod and laugh about? I mean, what is it you can agree upon first and focus on that possible? So I think that's really inspirational, to me. Um, you may have heard more recently there were two fathers whose daughters were both killed in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. One man was an Israeli, the other a Palestinian. This is described in a book called A Paragon, but they've been very active recently together, um, they've joined forces, these two men, focusing on their shared values and vision for a world without war. I mean, what a model of inspiration for us.
And digging in a little bit deeper there, in your experience, what's the difference between, seeking agreement and seeking understanding, and why does that distinction matter in leadership?
Yeah. I think, it's the focus again on the common ground. You don't have to have full agreement, but finding that shared vision to build forces to make it happen. You don't have to agree on everything. You just listen to connect. Again, people love to feel like they're heard. And where you can, move forward together. I mean, another example of someone who's influenced me decades ago, there was an author, Margaret Wheatley, who similarly focused on the conversation as a natural way we humans think together. And I think we've forgotten how to communicate with one another in a meaningful way. We've given way to sound bites and social media hyper divisions, but humans are smarter than that, one would hope. I think there's hope in bridging the divides that way.
Absolutely. And on that note, how do you think leaders can build the muscle of listening across power imbalances without defensiveness?
Yeah, I had such a good role model on that. The president of Smith College during the period during COVID and during so many challenges to liberal arts college campuses. And she struck me as a woman who was so thoughtful in seeking out input from all the different sectors on campus, students, people who worked to the service people on campus, professors, tenured and untenured, and just the whole community, alums, e- everyone. And she did such a great job of asking for people's input and really listening, and then weighing that input when she made her decisions, which were always grounded in input that you knew came from a broad spectrum. And that was so impressive. I think good leadership really comes from gathering information, listening and understanding all sides possible and relevant, and then integrating that input to a decision that reflects your understanding. When facilitating effectively either a community or diverse corporate group, all I like to have all relevant perspectives. I kind of say in the room. They're all in the room, all at the table. And it's kind of a condition for me taking on a contract that I ask the leadership or those who are bringing me on board to enable all the key players to be part of this discussion and part of the energy moving forward to attack an issue that they've raised. And I think also having everyone have an equal voice, an equal vote, have comments posted for all to see. If somebody doesn't understand what someone else is saying, they're asked to clarify so everybody gets it. And then together we can create a comprehensive summary and next steps. But everyone is equal, and participants own the results. If you don't own the results, it's rare that they feel committed to follow them through.
I t-
There's an example. I want to just say um, there was a really good example, if I have time to share this, with Weyerhaeuser Corporation in the 1970s. Responding to heat of labor union management discords, they started wisdom councils. And these were a process to give every employee a chance through a lottery system to meet in groups for a limited time to tackle whatever issue they wanted to address together. They could come up with the issue and they decided how they were going to address it. And these groups represented all parts of the corporation. And the group findings were shared with the company wide, and management committed to follow up on the recommendations. They were held accountable to the whole organization. And this lottery continued, so new groups formed every few months, and workers felt heard and involved in tackling the issues they cared about. They trusted this process, and they each had a voice in helping this monolithic organization feel more responsive to workers' voices and needs. And for a period, it didn't last, but for a period, this process helped set new directions for the company in challenging economic times.
And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I know that you've served on boards and advised leaders during moments of social unrest and organizational change and public scrutiny. So you talked a little bit about trust, but when digging into it a little bit deeper, what role does trust play when systems themselves feel really fragile?
Oh, such a great question. Trust is everything, right? I mean, when we understand what the other party or parties want, we can take the time to relate to them as equals, not as adversaries. There's the opportunity to create a win-win for all parties, which is far more sustainable than this win-loss, right? Contrary to the approach taken by current administration in the United States, for example. It's the trust that really resonates.
Absolutely. And on that note, when conversations around race, gender, climate, or equity becomes so emotionally charged, what helps keep people at the table rather than shutting down?
Yeah, another great question. I set ground rules starting out. It's just everybody understands what the rules of the game are, and I think another tact is to take time to cool down. Share common concerns and goals, and acknowledge also the messiness and ugliness that often happens when people are working together and sharing really emotional issues. That ugliness happens before a resolution. Being stuck often brings innovation. And another tactic that I think has been helpful when emotions are at their peak is to break into small work groups, that are maybe even one-on-one. So individuals are sharing, they have their own individual reflection, self-reflection, then sharing with small group or individuals, and then sharing what they've come up to together with a larger group, reporting back to the full group. And then the full group integrates those conversations. And sometimes breaking into the small groups helps uh, helps break up that tension in the room. I think establishing that all voices are equal and we together will find the common ground. Again, people usually want to just feel heard. I think the challenge today is that we have forgotten that the ethics and the value of listening and respecting each other, no matter how different we may seem from each other at the outset.
Uh,
I think all these interactions are based, again, on trust, confidentiality, and respect. In one group, the meetings are governed by what we call Charter House rules, which is based on an international policy deliberation group where candor is encouraged and the comments are not attributed to any one owner or speaker. So this ground rule makes for a really honest, rich dialogue for seeking future solutions, and it enables people to be really honest with each other and confidential and trust each other.
Absolutely. And digging in a little bit deeper too, as we know at World Pulse, we connect women across 190 plus countries, many with vastly different lived realities. How does global connection challenge our assumptions
Yeah.
about whose perspectives matter most?
That is such a great question right now. Oh my gosh. I think the assumption really is that those living comfortably in more developed countries have more expertise to share. That's the assumption. But I have been so impressed with the wisdom and the expertise, the patience, the innovations, and the resourcefulness that emanates from those in more challenged world environments. They often just really exude grace, understanding of what's feasible and what's important. And it's fascinating as women in the United States now are facing more heightened discrimination in the workplace. The glass ceiling that was first identified maybe in the late 70s and 80s is resurfacing with pressure on women professionals to return to home base and maternity, right? I think we can learn from women elsewhere who have been suppressed, oppressed for so long. We're so fortunate to have the connections with global women through World Pulse who have confronted challenges and barriers in their own countries. And now the opportunity to share and learn from each other is even more prevalent. And the assumption of who might learn from whom is a bit on its head.
As a board member, how do you see World Pulse being uniquely positioned to help women reach across divides, whether it's geographically, cultural, or ideological?
Yeah, I think World Pulse is in a really, really unique place because of its safe, protected social media network that enables women to really connect with each other about issues that they care about and learn and mentor and receive resources from each other. One of my fellow board members just at this recent meeting said so eloquently that World Pulse is that network, the essential bond enabling women everywhere to raise their voices, be heard, feel empowered and supported to do what they want and know that they know what needs to be done to improve conditions in their own communities. Without World Pulse, these voices, these actions, these impacts cannot exist. We really need each other. And I think World Pulse enables us to communicate and support one another in really powerful ways.
I think I have an idea of which board member you're talking about that would have said that.
I wish I could be as eloquent as she was. It was powerful hearing her.
Having worked with some incredible leaders, what kind of bridges do you believe women leaders are especially equipped to build right now, that
Yeah.
institutions alone can't?
That's really, really a good question. I think women know the heartbeats of their communities. Women connect. We collaborate in ways institutions are less nimble. And women leaders seem to project more willingness to hear and see and feel others' perspectives, that empathetic and altruistic power, perhaps, but for the benefit of the greater good. It's so many institutions, now run by men, have forgotten or perhaps never had that capacity. We need more women leaders globally, no question.
And looking at the landscape right now, we live in a world that often rewards speed, certainty, and strong opinions, right? So, how do we make space for curiosity, nuance, and, not knowing all the time?
That is exactly it, that you don't have to know all the time. I was just with a group that is, kind of citizen they call it Citizen Project, and it's based on just that, taking the time to seek out somebody who you may not normally interact with and really try to find what it is that they believe and where your common ground is, and going back to that. Um, but not being able to say that you don't know. If somebody asks you how you're feeling about something, it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm kind of waiting to really understand the full breadth of this issue. And I think having that curiosity, as you said, the nuance of not knowing, I it's challenging. It's very challenging right now when we're so driven with media and short sound bites. I just think there's it's the time. We need to take the time, and we have the ability. Each one of us has the ability to slow down and take the time and seek out somebody who you never would speak with normally, or whether it's in the grocery store or gas station or just walking on the street, and just take the time and to listen. And I think that's a challenge, but that's what we can all do. That's part of being human and recognizing the unique dignity in everyone. If we can do that, we can change the world.
And on that note, when you think about the next generation of women leaders, what skills or mindsets do you hope they develop to navigate division with courage and compassion?
Oh man, I think just knowing ourselves, just know yourself and ask for help when you need it, but be authentic, be who you are, and just say, hey, I just respecting, as we've said already, the dignity of each person, but knowing who you are is essential, and being open to learning from others is critical. So I think I would advise just be be candid, be open, be authentic, be yourself, be curious, ask, and seek to understand better, because you don't have all the answers. None of us have all the answers. But together it's better to really, to quote Margaret Wheatley, we're better together. And I truly believe that.
Absolutely. And that level of self awareness is so profound and often overlooked because you're always trying to figure out all the answers. But as long as you know who you are and what you know or don't know, it's often more powerful to just ask those questions, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if there was one practice, whether it's personal or collective, that helps us reach across divides with greater understanding, what would you offer to our listeners?
Yeah. I think one practice, oh my gosh, I'd say, as we've said already, respect the humanity in everyone and demonstrate by your own willingness to understand, to listen before talking, and the power of emphatic dialogue to find that common ground that we've talked about, to move forward better together. Drop your cell phones and connect.
And knowing what you know now, what gives you hope that meaningful bridges can still be built in today's polarized world?
Yeah, as I think I said at the outset, I think we're not really polarized. I think that's an easy thing for media to encourage people to feel, for the benefit of a few. I don't think we're that polarized. Really, I think I'd say probably 65% of people understand and have common values. It's the, you know, 15 or whatever it is on either side, the percent that can be really far right, far left, and not come near the twain shall meet. But I think just taking the time to interact with the people around you on a community level, that gives me hope. Community level reaching out and understanding and dialogue. That's where I think it's at. And that, I think, will enable us to build meaningful bridges despite what's going on around us.
And thank you so much for this conversation. I think what I'm taking away from this is that bridging the divide isn't necessarily about erasing differences, but about honoring it, right?
I agree. Yeah. And it's been such a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk about this. I believe in these issues so much. And I think each of us has the power to make a difference by just listening and talking with someone you don't normally talk with. That's going to make such a huge difference. If we can each do that, I think, well, I think the world would be a better place.
And like you said, it's about choosing curiosity over certainty and, listening over reaction and trust over assumption.
But we don't do it for whatever reason. I think just having faith, it's a leap of faith. You do have to kind of be assured that this person also might want to interact. And it's okay to just say, this is not the time and I can't do this right now, and agree to come back together another time. But if you have the opportunity, reach out and get to know somebody you didn't know at all and find out why they think the way they do. How can you work on something together you both believe in?
And thank you for modeling that so thoughtfully for us today. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, I love being here with you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, if something in today's conversation resonated, we invite you to take the next step. World Pulse exists to be a digital bridge, connecting women across the world so that no one has to lead, learn, or build change alone. To learn more or to get involved, visit impact.worldpulse.org or simply click the link in the show notes for this episode. Because whether you're here to listen, to contribute, or to simply belong, there's a place for you on this bridge. Thank you for joining us on the World Pulse podcast today. This conversation does not end here, it continues through connection. We'll see you next time.